Hello, my name is Jon Ferguson, and I'm one of the founding pastors at Community. You may not know this, but when Community first started, we began as a small group. Actually, there were only four of us, my brother Dave, myself, and our friends Scott and Darren, sitting around a breakfast table at a hen house restaurant in central Illinois. A quick show of hands if you remember hen house restaurants. Well, you're not missing much if you don't. But over the course of a couple of hours, we scribbled out a threefold vision that we're still trying to fulfill this very day. The first phase of that vision was that we wanted to be an impact church. That meant we wanted to impact the lives of people who had yet to find their way back to God. We also wanted to be the kind of church that would have a lasting impact on a community. The kind of church that would actually be missed by people in the community if somehow it suddenly disappeared. The second phase of that vision was to be a reproducing church. Yes, even from the beginning, we weren't content with simply growing one large church in one location. We knew we could have a greater impact and help more people find their way back to God if we reproduced our church over and over in order to reach more people in more communities all over Chicagoland. The third phase of that vision was to be a catalyst for a movement of reproducing churches. Now, truth is, we wouldn't always say this part of our vision out loud. I think we felt like it was a little presumptuous to talk about catalyzing a movement when there were only four of us sitting around a breakfast table in the middle of nowhere. Some would say we might try starting a small group before we talk about catalyzing a movement. At that point, we had about the same number of people interested in our church as Jesus had gathered on a hill when he gave his final instructions before returning to his Father in heaven. And here is the mission Jesus left for his followers. You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. The mission Jesus left for them was to not only reach the city of Jerusalem, but to reach beyond that to the entire world. And from day one, we believed that this mission was not just for that small group on that hill. We believe that this mission is for us as well. So when we left that hen house, you know what we did? Each of us started a small group. Well, there was only one problem. What do you need to start small groups? Well, you need people, and well, there were only a handful of us, so we all went to each other's small group. Now imagine what that was like. Using the same lesson each night, same icebreaker questions, with the same answers, night after night after night with the same people. But you know what? We had to do something to create the perception that there were more than just a handful of people who were interested in this new startup church. But you know what? Since that time, small groups, actually reproducing small groups, has been the very heartbeat of Community. And now, 20-some years later, Community and our church planting mission, New Thing, consists of thousands of small groups all over the world. And the secret to these small groups reproducing over and over again is this. Each one of us who started those very first small groups asked someone in our group to be an apprentice. Someone who could work and learn alongside us so that he or she would be equipped to eventually lead a new group. Yep, Community's vision is to continue to reproduce locations all over Chicagoland and to see 10,000 churches started all over the world. And we remain convinced that the only way this will be accomplished is when each of us live out the vision of apprenticeship and reproduce small groups that will help more and more people find their way back to God. Today, we're concluding our Circles series, where we've been talking about how circles really are better than rows because there's just stuff that happens in a circle that just can't happen in a row. And while we believe that what happens here on Sundays when we gather in rows is so important, I think we all know deep down that true connection and accountability happens in a circle. Heartfelt prayer for one another happens in a circle. Significant life change happens in a circle. And for those reasons, when we started Community, we actually started with circles before we started with rows. So let me ask, how many are currently in a small group? Quick show of hands. Or have been a part of a small group at one time or another? Okay, now how many of you have been in a group that reproduced? Actually started another group? My most recent experience with a reproducing small group was, quite honestly, sort of a mix of good and bad. The last small group I was in was one of the most amazing small groups I'd ever been a part of. I loved that group. I told you last week how like 6 or 7 different people in that group over relatively short period of time, made decisions to follow Jesus and were baptized. And it was in large part due to their experience in that small group. I mean, we enjoyed each other's company. Coming to group and participating in the conversations was easy. We were all super comfortable with each other, and because of that, the group grew. I mean, we had close to 20 people who were part of that small group. Well, about this time last year, we began to realize that the only way we would reach more people was for this group to become 2 groups. And so we made plans to reproduce. Was it easy? No. Did it feel particularly good at the time? Not really. What has been the result? Well, the original members miss being together, but here is why it was worth reproducing. Now, over 30 people are connected to a small group, and even more people are finding their way back to God. And you know what? That would have never happened had we stayed together and not reproduced. You see, our group was doing our small part to fulfill the Acts 1:8 Jesus mission. People finding their way back to God hinges on us reproducing new leaders who will start new groups. We call that process apprenticing. And you know, that's exactly what Jesus taught us to do. I mean, Jesus brought alongside himself not 1, but 12 apprentices, ordinary people with names like Peter, James, and John. And he asked them to be in his circle, to do life with him, and to learn from him. The concept was pretty simple, but it was through these men that he changed the world. The Apostle Paul, the most influential leader in the early church, followed that example of Jesus and invited a young man named Timothy to be his apprentice. Paul wrote several letters to his young apprentice Timothy, encouraging him as he carried the mission of Jesus forward. The books of 1st and 2nd Timothy in the New Testament are 2 of those letters. In the second letter to Timothy, Paul writes this. He says, "Timothy, my dear son, be strong with the special favor God gives you in Christ Jesus. You have heard me teach many things that have been confirmed by many reliable witnesses. Teach these great truths to trustworthy people who are able to pass them on to others." Paul took the life-changing message of Jesus and passed it on to Timothy, who would pass it on to other trustworthy people, who would pass it on to others. There are 4 generations of Christ followers being apprenticed in these verses. And what was the result? Dozens, then hundreds, and even thousands of people began to find their way back to God. As more and more people were apprenticed and sent out to lead, the Jesus mission spread to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And now, it's our turn. We believe that the most effective way we can carry the mission of Jesus forward is by apprenticing new leaders who will reproduce new small groups. I can't think of anything more compelling than helping others find their way back to God. And this is the best way to accomplishment. I believe there are people in this room today whom God is calling to become an apprentice. Now, you might think, well, how could it be me? I mean, I haven't even been a Christ follower very long. Or maybe you're thinking, well, I don't even know that much about the Bible, or how could I possibly apprentice to start a small group? Well, let me tell you something. It's not about how long you've been a Christ follower. It's not about being a Bible scholar, that's for sure. Let me describe 3 qualities that make someone a great apprentice, and maybe you'll begin to recognize these qualities in yourself. All right, the first quality is spiritual velocity. That doesn't mean you live a perfect life or, have this Christ-following thing all figured out. What it means is that the trajectory of your life is moving closer and closer to Jesus. You desire to live a Jesus-centered life. You're trying to be more like him in how you treat people, how you manage your time, how you steward your finances. I've seen spiritual velocity illustrated this way, okay? Let's say Jesus is represented as the cross in the middle of this diagram. All right? Now, we might look at this picture and think person A, inside the circle, is living a Jesus-centered life, while person B is not. But what if we had some movement to the picture? After all, God is always on the move. His mission is always moving into new places with new people. And if person B is pursuing Jesus and following wherever he is leading, well, person A is stagnant, remaining still. You see, it's actually person B who has spiritual velocity. So, my question for all of us is this. Is the direction of your life leading you closer to Jesus? Are you following him wherever he leads? If so, well, then you have spiritual velocity. All right, the second quality then is teachability. Apprentices are people who want to grow. They are willing to accept feedback in order to be developed. They don't assume they know it all. They want to learn. So ask yourself a simple question. Am I open to growing and being challenged in new ways? If you answer yes, chances are you're teachable. And then the third quality is relational intelligence. Relational intelligence is grounded in an understanding that people matter. People matter to God, and they need to matter to us. A person with relational intelligence looks for the best in others. They genuinely care about people and want to help others find their way back to God. Other people enjoy being around a person with relational intelligence because they feel cared for and valued. When it comes to relational intelligence, I challenge people to make sure you pass the caller ID test. In other words, how is someone likely to respond when they see your name on their phone? Oh, it's Jon Ferguson. I think I'll let it go to voicemail. Or are they excited to pick up? Or are they likely to let it go to voicemail? We believe that the most effective way we can carry the Jesus mission forward is to apprentice new leaders who will reproduce small groups. And I fully believe that there are people in the room today whom God is calling, maybe even right now, to become an apprentice. In fact, I want to tell you about someone who took this step just this past year. Chris was my small group apprentice. And when he was baptized about a year ago, he talked about his experience in a small group. And I want to share with you what he said at his baptism. He wrote this. He said, "I'm 50 now, probably more than halfway done. I've worked hard to get here. Many would say that I've achieved the American dream, and yet there's something missing. There's something big missing. So I'm on a search to find out what it is. And I think I'm onto it. My wife and I did the unthinkable about a year ago. We joined a small group. A church group? Isn't going to church almost every Sunday enough? Oh, and then I was approached to help start a men's group that included a retreat and weekly meetings where I had to memorize verses. Bible verses? Well, I've been doing all of this for over a year now, and here are some things that I've discovered. Number one, every single person in my life, in your life, and in this room has the same need. We all hunger for a higher purpose. There's got to be more to life than just going to school, getting a job, getting married, retiring, and dying. Number two, I want more. I need more. The more I participate, the more I learn, and the closer I feel to understanding exactly what my purpose here is in life. Number three, I can't get there by myself. There's no way I can grow spiritually without a deep involvement in the community of other believers. And finally, number four, he writes, I still have a long way to go, but I feel that finally, after a half century of trying it my own way, that I'm on the right path, the path to filling in the blanks, to answering the unanswered questions, the path to finding my way back to God. Well, after I sat down with Chris and told him that I saw in him the qualities that I mentioned earlier, we began our apprenticing relationship. And we followed a very simple process. And the first step is this: I do, you watch, we talk. In this step, I led the group, and Chris watched and observed me leading. And then sometime throughout the course of the week, we'd get together for coffee and talk about what he observed. The next step was I do, you help, we talk. And in this step, I began to give Chris some responsibility for leading the group. I asked him to lead the icebreaker. Sometimes I had him lead the prayer time at the end of the group or follow up on people who weren't able to be at the group. And then again, we'd get together outside of group and again talk about what he was observing and how he was developing in this process. Next then was you do, I help, we talk. When Chris was ready, we moved on to this step where he was actually leading the bulk of the small group and I was helping. And of course, we kept meeting to talk outside of groups so that I could encourage him and give him feedback until we were ready for the next step, which was you do, I watch, we talk. Now, this was my favorite because this is when I got to kick back and watch Chris lead. Actually, we kind of jumped this step early on when I got sick one night, called Chris at the last minute and told him, well, Chris, it looks like it's got to be you do and I stay home tonight. But it wasn't long before I knew Chris was ready to lead a group on his own, which takes us to the final step in the process. You do, someone else watches. And now Chris is leading his own group and ready to repeat the process by having his own apprentice. This is what it looks like to reproduce a leader and a small group. This is how we carry the Jesus mission forward. So, here are 3 takeaways for each of us here today. Okay, ready? Here we go. First, if you aren't already in a small group, find one. Get connected in a circle where you can begin to live out the Jesus mission with a group of people. Secondly, become an apprentice. I'll tell you what, ask your small group leader about coming alongside him or her for the purpose of helping more people find their way back to God. Now, he or she might say, well, I don't think you're quite ready yet, and offer some suggestions for getting you on the path toward apprenticing, but he or she will not say flat out no. And then thirdly, help reproduce a new small group. Even if you're not going to be an apprentice, you can still help reproduce a small group. Join an apprentice. Come alongside an apprentice as they start a new circle and welcome others in as together you advance the Jesus mission. Ultimately, reproducing leaders in small groups is all about helping people find their way back to God. I mean, so many times when people make the important decision to follow Jesus and get baptized, we hear from them how their small group played such a key role in that decision. That's why we reproduce small groups, so we can celebrate people finding their way back to God, just like we're going to get to do today. See, today is a very exciting day for community. Today we are celebrating people being baptized at all 12 of our locations as hundreds of people decide to go public with their faith in Jesus. The people who are choosing to get baptized today they're drawing a line in the sand. They're putting a stake in the ground. They are making a public statement of their desire to follow Jesus and be a part of carrying this mission forward. And today you can make the decision to become a follower of Jesus and join him on his mission, also by publicly declaring your faith through baptism. If you've never taken this step in your spiritual journey, let me just ask you, okay? Why not? Why not? What is holding you back? What is stopping you? As Jesus began his public ministry, he actually modeled this act of baptism for us as an example we should follow. If you want to follow him and join him in this mission, we invite you to be baptized today. Now, maybe you're thinking, I didn't really come ready for this. I don't have any extra clothes or a towel. Don't worry. We have everything you need to make this decision today. We have t-shirts, clothes, hair dryers, and towels. I think we even have underwear in multiple sizes and colors. Now, I'm not so sure about the colors part, but we do have different sizes. In other words, we are over-prepared and have done everything we can to make this moment possible for you today. Now, sometimes I talk to people and they say, I was baptized as a baby and I'm not sure if I really need to make this decision as an adult. All I can tell you is this. In the Bible, this decision to be baptized was always a step of faith that a person took for themselves. Your decision to be baptized doesn't lessen the decision your parents made for you years ago. As a matter of fact, I think it affirms it as you choose for yourself what they wanted for you all along. So, if you've never taken this step, let me ask you again. What is stopping you? You see, today can be the day you take this important step to declare your commitment to Jesus and become part of his mission to help even more people find their way back to God.